and welcome to week 4 of lifespan development. This week we're going to be focusing on infancy, so about the first year of life. And first, I'm going to answer some of your questions. So, as per usual, I have divided these into class questions and content questions, and we're going to start with the class questions. So, first of all, what exactly are we supposed to write about in our lifespan case study? So for next week, I'm going to put together an entire video about this, but for now, I suggest you go in and read the rubric. On our Blackboard site, there is a folder called Syllabus and Rubrics, or Rubrics and Syllabus, I don't remember which. And in there, you will find a rubric called Lifespan Case Study. Read it. It is your favorite document for this project. It tells you every single little thing you have to do. From there, we'll pick it up. So next week, I'll make a video and I'll kind of discuss the various parts of the project and how to go about fulfilling them. But also, this is what the homeworks are. So last week's homework was the first time we did this. You read an excerpt from Call the Midwife, and then I asked you to apply Bronfenbrenner's theory. So from here on out, each week, we are going to practice applying the theories we learn in the textbook to a real excerpt from somebody's memoir or autobiography. That way, you actually do learn and have a way of practicing what you need to do for the lifespan case study. I don't expect you to just be able to pull it out of your hat. So, are we going to be presented with different guidelines for the case study, such as different timelines and due dates, or is there just one overall due date? Read the syllabus. So in the syllabus, there is a week-by-week breakdown of what assignments are due when, and that includes various due dates for the lifespan case study. So last Friday, you needed to have turned in a short list of 3 people you might be interested in studying, and you were supposed to meet with me. If you haven't met with me yet, please email me, because then we need to meet this week before you make your final case study subject decision. That's going to be due on Friday. So you're going to need to turn in the name and the APA citation of the person you're going to use. It's really important that you meet with me, because in my experience, students who do not meet with me do not do well in this project. It's a fine needle to thread in terms of somebody you're interested in who has a biography written about them that covers enough of their lifespan. You want to meet with me. It's also part of your grade. So in the rubric, you will find that meeting with me is literally worth points on this project. So email me if you have not met with me yet. You're also going to have a draft due in October. There's going to be a peer review activity at the end of October, beginning of November. I don't remember which. Check the syllabus. And then the final due date is going to be in December. So yeah, I've scaffolded it out so that you have a chance to really focus on the project and you won't wait till the end and fail miserably. A lot of times when I'm doing my 3-2-1, I am self-reflecting on my week. It just happens. Is this okay? Yes, that is part of the point. So the 3-2-1s are what is called a metacognitive exercise. The idea is I am trying to get you to think about what you've learned, what you know, what you don't know, and how the week went. So that's why I want you to give 3 things you learned, 2 questions you have, and 1 thing you want me to know. It gives you a chance, it forces you to reflect on what you've learned and the content of the week, and how that learning process went. It's very important. Is the midterm and final going to have an essay? So I mostly do short answers. I don't assign essay questions where you're going to have to write like pages and pages and pages. No. For the most part, the midterm and the final are going to be longer versions of your homework assignment. So it's just mostly going to be a lot of short answers. You're going to have readings. You're going to have to do various things. But think of it like an extended homework assignment. I want to know when we can find out the date for the final exam. So the final exam, they finally published the final exam schedule. That was not published when the semester began. your final exam is going to be available for 72 hours between November 30th and December 2nd. You will have the entire 72 hours to work on it. It should not take you 72 hours. Don't worry about it. I'm just letting you pick when you work on it, and it's not timed because that's too much work for me. I would also like to know the format of both the midterm and the final. So like I just said, it's mostly going to be short answers. I'm not going to say it's all short answers because sometimes I have you do little activities. I'm annoying that way. But yeah, so don't worry too much about it. It's not going to be any unlike what you see on your homeworks or in the discussion activities. It'll be fine. And that is it for the class questions. So we're going to get into the content questions now. Starting with, can a mother choose whether to have a natural birth or a C-section? Or do C-sections only occur when necessary? So in the United States, that depends on your insurance. So some insurance plans allow for elective C-sections. Other insurance plans say, no, C-sections are far more expensive and they're not medically necessary, and you shouldn't be having major abdominal surgery unless it is medically necessary because there are risks and recovery and so on and so forth. So it really depends on your specific insurance plan whether or not you can have an elective C-section. How do you properly apply Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory to the birthing process? So that's going to be covered on the next slide. I have an entire video dedicated to that one homework question because that was the most important homework question in terms of applying Bronfenbrenner's theory, because that's also what you're going to have to do in your lifespan case study. Why is there not more research on the effects of over-the-counter drugs during pregnancy? It's an ethics thing. You can't give over-the-counter drugs to pregnant women unless you know that they're safe, because you could put either them or their fetus, their baby, at risk. And it would be unethical to experiment on pregnant women because their baby cannot give consent or assent to the experiment, and you don't know what's going to happen, so that's why. In the video I watched for the discussion, the lady who gave birth in Nigeria was overdue by over 2 weeks. Is that normal? Would doctors allow it to go on for longer, or would they induce her like they did in the video? So being 2 weeks overdue, that's pretty much as far as doctors will allow a pregnant woman to go without medical intervention. We talk about being 9 months pregnant. 9 months isn't actually full gestation. It really depends, and what culture you're living in depends on what full gestation is considered. So in some places it's 36 weeks, which is 9 months. Some places it's 38 weeks. That's here in the United States. We call 38 weeks full term. So that's actually 9.5 months. And then 40 weeks is still considered perfectly normal, and that's 10 months pregnancy. And that here in the United States, we would call 40 weeks gestation overdue. At that point, you can start to have some medical complications purely because the size of the baby versus the size of the hole it needs to come out of, physics starts getting in the way a little bit. So it's usually about 40 weeks is as far as doctors will allow you to progress without inducing you. What is your opinion on home births? Why doesn't the water always break immediately into labor? So I'm fine with home births as long as you have no risks or known complications that may occur. So if you're diabetic, that's considered a high-risk pregnancy. You should not be having a home birth. But if you've been healthy throughout your entire pregnancy, there's nothing shown up on any scans for you or the baby, it's perfectly acceptable to have a home birth, provided that you are attended by a licensed and certified nurse midwife. Your medical needs can be met just as well at home as in the hospital until something goes wrong, in which case you call 911, you get an ambulance, you go to the hospital. So yeah, it depends on your comfort level. But yeah, in general, if you have a low risk pregnancy, there's no reason why you need to go and have your baby in a hospital. And yeah. When you are pregnant with twins, do you have two placentas or do you just have one for both the babies? It depends on the type of twins. So monozygotic or identical twins will share a single placenta, whereas dizygotic or fraternal twins will have two placentas. And that's because monozygotic twins come from a single ovum. So that ovum at one point split a bit too much and ended up into two different babies, but they will share the same placenta. Dizygotic twins means that there were two different ova. You ovulated an extra ovum, and those both got pregnant, both got fertilized. So then you have two fertilized eggs in you, and they develop into two separate babies with two separate placentas. Is it common to have a degree in midwifery, or is it typically just nurses who assist in deliveries? Also, what are doulas, and what's the difference? Okay, so I can't tell you qualifications for midwives really depend on where you are. It even depends on what state you're in here in the United States. So I can only answer for the state of New York. In New York, a certified nurse midwife, that means you have a 4-year bachelor's degree in nursing, so you are a registered nurse. You then do your 2-year master's degree in nursing, which gives you which makes you a nurse practitioner. In the state of New York, nurse practitioners have all of the rights and privileges of doctors. So you can have your own practice, you can prescribe medications, you can have your own patients. You do not require any oversight from a doctor. Other states do require nurse practitioners to have oversight. New York State is not one of them, because at this point you've had 6 years of medical training, which is the same amount of medical training as a doctor in terms of number of years. And then you are also required to do a 2-year midwifery certification, which is the equivalent of a second master's. So at that point you have 8 years of training, and one of those years of the midwifery is a practicum, so you spend a year practicing under the oversight of a already licensed and certified midwife. So at that point you are a nurse midwife. You have been studying you have been in medical training for 8 years, you have practical experience, you are as well trained in low risk pregnancies as an obstetrician. So yeah, you are a healthcare professional. Obstetricians focus a lot more of their training on high risk pregnancies and complications and those kinds of things. So actually, if you are low risk, you are somewhat better off with a nurse midwife, because they are better trained to help low risk labors and deliveries, and they are also better trained to notice when something could go wrong but might not go wrong, and to sit back and observe and to not intervene until actually medically necessary, whereas a lot of obstetricians will intervene sooner than medically necessary, and that can actually cause harm as well. Will your vagina still tear if you have an elective C-section? No, because the baby never makes it that far. The baby never makes it past the cervix, so your vagina will not tear if you have an elective C-section. Is it true that some mothers eat the placenta? Yes, and it is not a good idea. So, many mammals eat placentas. It is natural, it is fine, and that is where humans got the idea, is observing other mammals eating the placenta and saying, oh, probably that's a good idea because the animal wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't good for them, so we should do it. However, human placentas, think about how they work. The placenta not only brings nutrients in, it also works as a filter, taking waste out. So by the end of a pregnancy, it has quite a bit of the baby's waste in the placenta. And it can also have very, very, very high levels of vitamin A, because it's filtering what gets through to the baby as well as back. And as we learned this past week, vitamin A can be a teratogen. It can harm the baby. So one of the things the placenta does is it tries to filter out the harmful things from getting to the baby. It doesn't want to let things through, including vitamin A. If you have too much of your placenta, you can get vitamin A poisoning. It can actually make you sick. So human placentas can be poisonous, and probably best not to eat them. What's with all the boiling water? Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption, because the boiling water was discussed a little bit in Call the Midwife, but the way it's phrased, I'm going to assume that whoever wrote this question has read other books where home births take place, it is a very common cultural trope about boiling gallons and gallons and gallons of water, and that never seems to be used. Yeah, it's a thing. Basically, boiled water is important when having a home birth, so you can use boiling water to sterilize instruments. However, just boiling water downstairs and bringing hot water upstairs, that's not hot enough to sterilize instruments. You actually need to place the instruments in boiling water and keep them there for 12 minutes and keep them under the water until it's time to be used. Otherwise, they're no longer sterile. And you only really need about a half a gallon to sterilize the instruments required to deliver a baby. You can also hot water is helpful, not boiling water, but hot water, warm water is helpful for bathing the mother, bathing the baby, keeping things clean, mopping things up, that. But you probably don't need much more than about 2 gallons of boiled water to deliver a baby. So the reason you have so many gallons of boiling water is historically to keep the men busy. It gives them something to do, and it makes them feel like they're contributing to the situation. And that is why you boil water. Yeah. Okay, so that is it for all of the questions. If you want to skip over to the next video and the next slide, we will go over call the midwife and how to apply Bronfenbrenner to a birth.